Hi friends, Prepared Suburbanite, back at you with another video and my thoughts on the stages of becoming a prepper. I've been through this myself. I've seen other people go through very similar stages in the prepping dynamic, and I wanted to share my thoughts on the stages of prepping. So stick around. The 4 stages of prepping, the way I see it, and this may be different for your experience, but it starts with discovery. The discovery of the need to begin to prepare for whatever it is that you're planning to prepare for. You've got to discover the real need, and it may come from an event that you've experienced, a flood, a fire, a big snowstorm, something in the event kind of a category that says, hey, here's a trigger. I'm going to have to be prepared for the next time this comes around. So if you lose power for an extended period of time and you end up throwing a whole refrigerator full of food and meat away and a freezer full of frozen food away because you lost power, you may just want to invest in a generator. Alternate sources of keeping your food fresh if that's what happened. I got a friend of mine that experienced a house fire. Pretty serious. He still rebuilding, and it's been 6 months now. Pretty dour event. The dead of winter. He lives way up north. Built a fire in the fireplace. Didn't fully close the screen in the front. Fire starts. Flues open. Stormy day. And a gust of wind somehow came down that chimney and knocked a couple of sparks onto a footstool that was made out of foam and fabric and all that, and it started smoldering. He was in the shower while this was going on, and by the time he got out of the shower with a towel wrapped around him, his whole living room and den was engulfed in flames. He barely was able to get out of the house. The fire department was on the way. They put the fire out, limited most of the damage to that end of the house, but really did some terrific damage. He began to realize that having furniture that close to his fireplace that was rated flammable was not a real darn good idea. So part of his preparation and part of his prepping discovery was that he was going to spend a lot more time before he bought new furniture, bought cushions, bought carpeting, bought whatever he needed to buy to refurbish that place, to make sure that he was going to be dealing with fire retardant chemicals, fire retardant materials, so that it would never happen again. But that's the kind of an event that can trigger the discovery of the need to prep. It could come from a situation, political situations, maybe like we're currently experiencing right here in the good old US of A. You go to other countries like Venezuela and all that. Hey, I'll tell you what, those people are hurting right now. The people that were prepared fared a whole lot better, but the trigger was a political event. Civil war, insurrection, craziness in the political society, adoption of policies that just don't work. Those are the kinds of things that can trigger the discovery of the need to prepare. Can come from a belief, faith-based beliefs. Folks that are preparing for Armageddon, the biblical Armageddon, they're preparing for biblical Armageddon. They're believing that the second coming of Christ is imminent right now, and they are doing everything that they can do to prepare. But that's the trigger for that kind of thinking. Not that it's right, not that it's wrong, not making any judgment calls on whether the beliefs are right or wrong or whatever. It's just that it's an identifiable trigger for the discovery of the need to be prepared. It can be learned. Your need to be prepared can be a learned skill. You can pick it up from your family, from your parents, from your grandparents. I know that my granddad was a prepper through and through, even though he never heard the term before. He was well prepared for everything. His basement was well stocked with canned goods, with foods that were preserved, jams and jellies and fruits and vegetables and all that. That's what they did back in those days, and he was successful through the Depression and World War I, the Depression, and through World War II. They didn't go without, because they had the skills, they had the desire, they had the motivation to deal with being prepared. And it was a learned thing. I think some of that passed down to me. Second stage in prepping is affirmation. One should discover that, maybe I should really be prepared for the next time we get a flood, for the next time we get a snowstorm, for the next time something could happen, that can happen. You got to reaffirm it. So you do some research on it. What are the chances of having a flood in your particular area? What conclusions are you going to be able to reach based on the research that you've done for floods and storms, or EMPs, or coronal mass ejections, or civil war, or economic collapse, or you name it? You've done some research. Based on that research, you're going to come to some conclusions. And once you come to some conclusions, then if you believe that being prepared is really going to be the right strategy, then you enter the affirmation acceptance stage and you begin to adopt the philosophy. That philosophy then turns itself into action. Now, action can take an awful lot of different steps and stages depending on who you are, what your upbringing is, what your educational levels are, all that kind of stuff. But it basically boils down to assessing your current situation, coming up with a plan to meet your needs, organize, get the plan ready to roll out, and then implement the plan. Now, you need to identify weaknesses, you need to identify strong points, weak points, you name it. You got to identify it so that you can actually deal with it. Got to take a look at your economic situation, take a look at your budget. What can I afford to do? What can I cut back on? What can I reinvest money in? Take a look at your space requirements around your home, around your bug out location here and there, to make sure that you're going to have the space and plan to have the right kind of space if you're going to start accumulating foodstuffs that it can carry you and your family through for 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, or whatever it is that you feel is going to be necessary for you. You've identified the skill sets that you've got. You've identified the skill sets that you're going to need to have to survive in a grid down kind of a situation where there is no power, where there is no infrastructure to depend on. And once you've identified those skills that you think you're going to need, you got to get yourself educated on those. So that's part of the action plan. It's part of the implementation plan. As you implement, what are you going to have to do? Well, get involved. If you got a local prepper group, get involved with that. You can learn an awful lot from other folks that have already started, that are already involved in being preppers. Enroll in classes and courses. If one of the skills that you want to develop is welding, go down to the local community college and enroll in their welding class. A couple nights a week, a little bit of an investment in some some tools, and I would bet that within a very short period of time, you'll be able to do basic welding that should be enough to get you through if that's one of the skill sets that you've identified. It could be anything that you identify. It could be fire building, could be shelter making, could be any of the bushcraft kinds of skills, carpentry, welding, electrical, mechanical. Identify those skills, educate yourself, get some training. Identify where you are with your current level of foodstuffs, water storage. Take a look at what you've really got. Take a look at what you think you're going to need based on your discovery and affirmation of your need to prepare, and start the process of shoring up your food stores and water stores so that you can meet the challenge. If your challenge is, I got to be able to just make it through 2 weeks, then that's your first target. Amass enough food to keep you and your family fed for 2 weeks. Make sure that you've got enough water on hand and a way to purify that water, a way to obtain additional water so that you can get through that 2-week period of time. That can be as simple as buying a few cases of water. It could be capturing some rainwater off your roof to use for secondary sources, gray water basically for flushing toilets or whatever you need to do. That's the kind of stuff that you're going to get into in the planning, implementing, and organizing steps in your action plan. If you've identified skills, practice those skills. Gain the experience that you're going to need. I heard Pastor Joe Fox say, without anything in your pocket, can you go out in the woods and start a fire? Well, that's a tough question to answer. I think I can. I'm not 100% sure. If it's pouring rain, it could be quite a challenge. But that's one of the skills that you should be practicing on if you find that you may be facing that kind of a situation where you're going to need to know how to build a fire with little more than what's available in nature. The fourth and final phase in prepping is the actualization phase. You've been through all the assessments, you've been through all the planning, you've got yourself organized, you're training in your skills, you're practicing, you're purchasing, you've got your foodstuffs all lined up, you've got your plan met. So you're good with food and water and shelter and means of self-defense, and your skills are right where you think they need to be. That's when you become basically self-actualized, to steal a term from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's the highest level in the hierarchy of needs, is being able to be actualized, saying, I've got enough confidence that I can meet the challenges based on my discovery of my need to prepare. All right, we've talked about the 4 steps in being prepared. The discovery phase, the affirmation and acceptance phase, the action phase, where you're actually getting the job done, and then the actualization phase, when you believe you've met your goals. The next phase that can happen, and happens to an awful lot of folks that are preppers, you ready, is called burnout. Well, burnout, kind of an odd term. I did a little bit of Googling on it, but the best definition that I could come up with is that there's nothing left to burn. You know, you look at a fire, if there's no more fuel, there's nothing left to burn, the fire burns out. There's no more oxygen, the fire burns out. It's simple as that. So there's nothing left to burn, and we're talking about what's not there. What's not there is the motivation, is the interest, and the focus on being prepared. You've already met your initial challenges. You've already met your initial goals. You've got enough food for the 2 weeks, for the 2 months, for the 6 months, for the 1 year, for you and your family and your extended group, or whatever it is that you set your goals to meet, you've met the goals. You've got enough stuff. You've got bug out bags. You've got food. You've got freeze-dried stuff, dehydrated stuff. You've got water and water purification systems, and you name it, you got it. And you've spent a number of months, years, whatever, to accumulate all that kind of good stuff so that you can be prepared to meet your definition of what your needs are going to be if the S hits the fan. And now you got nothing else to do. You're already there. Now what do you do? Well, sit on the couch, watch TV? Gee, not quite sure what you're going to do. A lot of folks have reached that stage. I've seen it not only in the prepper community, but I've seen it with folks that are on career paths. They reach a certain level, they realize, hey, this is where I wanted to be. You know, I am now a practicing physician, and I've got a great practice, and here I am, and I'm 55 years old, and I've achieved everything that I wanted to achieve. I've got the full retirement package all taken care of. My kids are grown and gone. I really don't have any need to continue to be fully employed as a whatever, professional engineer, physician, businessman, whatever. So they retire, they give it up, and immediately become bored. They're burned out. They don't know what to do. Well, here's some thoughts on what you can do if you find yourself nearing that phase, or you are in that phase, and I think I was very close to that phase over the last few months or so. Revisit all your assumptions that you discovered and that you affirmed. If your whole plan was to just make sure that you've got 2 weeks worth of food, put together 2 weeks worth of water, and you've got a safe shelter in case there's a flood or a hurricane in your area, you can survive for 2 weeks, take care of yourself, be self-sufficient. Revisit your assumptions, revisit your affirmations. Maybe 2 weeks isn't going to be enough. Maybe it needs to be a month. Maybe it needs to be 6 months. Maybe it needs to be based on another assumption or a different set of assumptions before you make the decision to cash it in and say, I'm burned out, I've achieved my goals, I'm done. Second thing that comes to mind is get a second opinion. If you belong to a prepper group or a mutual assistance group, or you've just got some friends that are into being prepared, talk to them. Find out what they're doing. Have them come and talk to you. Take a look at your inventories, take a look at your skill sets, take a look at what you've think you've got as far as your skill sets and your inventories and all that, and get their opinion. Now, use people that you can trust, obviously, people whose opinions you trust, people whose psyche would be able to protect your operational security. But go get a second opinion from somebody you trust. It'll give you some interesting thoughts on where you should refocus your energies so that you can rediscover the need to be a prepper. Identify those new skills. If you think you've got everything down that you're going to need, but you don't know how to cook, go learn how to cook. Learn how to barbecue, learn how to bake a cake, bake bread, make pickles, preserve food, dehydrate food, make beef jerky, whatever it is. Learn a new skill. Identify a skill that you think is going to be really helpful for you, and work on that skill until you got it. That's going to remotivate you, and it's going to make you take a second look at all your assumptions in your discovery plan already. If you're not involved in a prepper group or a mutual assistance group, maybe it's time to really get involved in one. I know that there's a couple, 3 around here I was involved in a couple of years ago. Learned a lot from those people. The group kind of splintered and went a couple different ways, but now it's reforming, and there's a couple of new groups that have popped up from that original core group that are out doing some pretty good things. Well, those are my thoughts on being prepared, the stages of being prepared, what can happen when you think you're prepared, and some of the remedies to maybe get you over the hump. If you've hit a wall and you think you're burning out, maybe some of these thoughts will get you back on track. This is the Prepared Suburbanite reminding you to be prepared always, and I'll see you on the next video.